Close meeting to order Monday, September 20th. Roll call, please.
Mayor Nathan Anderson.
Here.
Troy Boone.
Here.
Troy Doden.
Here.
Will Wolke.
Here.
Art Schott.
Here.
Teresa Sligan. And Mike Tiedemann.
Agenda was sent out. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
We'll move to adopt the agenda.
Yeah, second.
Motion by Boone and seconded to adopt the agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda is adopted. Minutes for the September 7th, 2021 meeting were sent out. Is there a motion to approve the September 7th minutes?
Doden moves to approve the minutes from September 7th.
Second. Motion by Doden and seconded to approve the September 7th, 2021 minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's approved. Visitors to be heard. Mr. Red Jensen, Beresford area radio.
Yeah, I feel a little silly coming back on this. I spoke with Greg Bates here probably a couple weeks ago and about the extension of the flying field out there. He was enthusiastically supportive of helping us. One of the things maybe I was naive about, I was assuming that there was going to be some grass seed involved with this, and finding out that grass seed is way more expensive than originally I would have expected, looking at that $1,200 to $1,800 for enough grass seed to do, basically at 2 1/4 acres at the 6 pounds per 1,000 feet. We were looking to see if we could get assistance with that from the city.
Is there any money left in Greg's budget for that?
It's very tight. Very, very tight.
Who's gonna, prepare the ground and everything?
So we have a lot of the ability to prepare ground. Greg was gonna help with the overseeding and seeding of it.
The seeding of it?
Yeah, but the actual seed cost is, what we're talking about. I have access to equipment for filling up ground.
Okay. So there won't be, in theory, there's not gonna be a whole lot more expense than the grass seed for the city.
Yes. I mean, we'd have to ask Greg if he thought there was anything else, but we were gonna fill it up.
Council has contingency funds. We haven't spent any of it this year either.
You have,
We
with the
have.
bathrooms, the golf course bathroom and the parks bathroom that went, well, you haven't actually made the motion to, but those bathrooms went over budget.
How much is left in the contingency fund, if any?
30,000 was put in there for the year. The bathrooms were budgeted at 225,000, and they came in at 251,000. So there's a shortage of 25,760 on the overspent on the bathrooms.
Do
So there's,
we have 1,200 for grass seed?
so there's a little bit there.
It's a one-time shot, we put the grass and you're gonna level and everything, do your own equipment.
Yes. The biggest thing here is we're going off Greg's recommendation of when to plant, either it's this fall or it ends up being spring, depending on when the crops are out.
Here's our one question, that could we make a motion today, or we gotta put it on the agenda?
It's on the agenda.
Are you good with that, Jerry?
Absolutely.
Greg will do, he just didn't have the funds budgeted for the grass seed, so we're okay doing it. It's just, we wanna make sure you guys are aware and take it out of some other funds to do that.
Need a motion?
That'd be probably, yeah.
Shall I make a motion for Brad Jensen, Beresford Area Radios Flyers Club to finish all 2 1/4 acres of landscaping in the city to provide up to 1,200 limit.
It says 12 to 1,800.
Yeah, that depends what Greg picks out. I did my internet research, $2 to $3 a pound
Under
for grass.
2,000, under 2,000 total.
Could be more than that.
Pardon?
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be more than that.
I'd rather make one motion and we're done, so under 2,000, that's the best I can do. I don't wanna go any higher because we're pretty close to the mark. For the Beresford area radio flyers club, Grassy.
I'll second Art's motion to approve, spend up to $200 out of the council contingency funds, $2,000 for proceed for the radio flyer club.
Motion by Shot and seconded to approve 2,000 from the council contingency fund for the Beresford area radio flyers grass project. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Next business will be heard, Tanya Miller, Manor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I know I've met several of you, I've seen several familiar faces, and for those of you I haven't, it's a pleasure to meet you. So I'm hoping to make wastewater and sanitary sewer collection simple tonight. That's my goal. And I put a handout on your chair, what I'm going to walk through. And a lot of this will just kind of give you a good summary of what's been done recently in a facility plan that the city's had prepared. And I think the first kind of thing to understand is why. Why did the city have to have the facility plan prepared? So I'm on the second slide. It says need for project at the top. And so in Beresford's current wastewater discharge permit, which is regulated by the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, they included a compliance order in that permit. And the reason they issued a compliance order is because the city has had several violations in their wastewater discharge the last couple of years, predominantly caused by high flows, which then don't allow the wastewater to sit in the ponds long enough and get the treatment it needs. So that's the primary reason is the flows have been high. But then the other thing is the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources is going to be including ammonia limits in the next city discharge permit. That is a common regulated kind of wastewater component. More and more systems, the towns the size of Beresford are having to address ammonia in their effluent limits. I'm working with the city of Parkston right now on the exact same thing. And so the treatment process out there is not going to be able to handle it. And so they knew that the city would need to do something, to build a process to remove that ammonia. And so that's why they've got a construction schedule in the current permits. And what we've got recommended tonight will allow the city to meet those limits, and it will allow the city to do that in a timeline to meet that compliance schedule. And I'll go through that. And then the other thing we'll go through is, in addition, is the collection system improvements and what can be done to reduce the high flows during stormwater events. So going on to the next page. So I'm an engineer, so I'm a little nerdy. So yeah, you've got a little ammonia atom there, a little bit of that. We'll sneak in here once in a while. But the 30-day average for ammonia is going to be at 1 milligram per liter. It might be higher, a little bit higher than that in the summer. It won't go lower than that. But meeting an ammonia limit of 1 is tough in a pond system, if not impossible. You won't be able to do it consistently, and that's why additional treatment's needed. The daily maximum limit will be somewhere between 2 and 3, the DNR said. And then the other thing that's likely coming down is they're going to put a summertime E. coli limit, and that just limits the bacteria that's in the discharge. And so there's 2 ways to do that. One, you can add disinfection during the summer, so you either add chlorine and then dechlorinate. Another very commonly used method is UV disinfection, and that's what we looked at in here because there's no chemical for operators to handle. It's very effective, and it's very low cost because you're basically paying power costs because you don't have ongoing chemical costs. And so I've got the limits for the E. coli on there as well. So turning the page, part of what we do when we put a facility plan together is the state requires you look at a minimum 20-year planning period. We usually look out 25 because it's supposed to serve the population for 20 years. Well, it takes some time to get funding and get it built. So we usually go out 25, so there's a little cushion. So right now the population, or the 2020 population for Beresford is estimated to be 2,032 people. We've projected it out to 2216 for 2045. So a kind of a slow, steady increase in population. I know in talking with Jerry, he said it looks like maybe the census numbers might be higher. If they would come out higher, we need to revise this and just adjust the capacity upward a little bit. We could do that at some point prior to design with amending this facility plan to the DNR. So you're not completely locked in if things would change. There's some time. All right, going on to the next slide. this is what I want to point out to kind of illustrate the problem. So this picture right here, on here, and I'm going to try to sit, but sometimes I get excited and want to walk around. So if I stand up and start pointing at things, that's why. This is a partial flow. This is an actual picture of the device out at the ponds, and this measures the flow into the ponds. And so city staff periodically write down what the flow is coming in. And so there's flows documented here. And so for 2018, there's the population and the average day flow, but what I want to call your attention to is that column on the far right side where it says average day per capita flow. So you can see in 2018 that average day per capita was up at 528 gallons per person per day, which is a lot. Typically, and that's only about 2 or 3 months of data, but the reason it wasn't a full year is the other portion of the year it was completely submerged, which means it was flowing even higher. So 2019, there's no data. That's when it was incredibly wet, and the partial flume was submerged most of the year, so they couldn't get records. We do have almost a full year of 2020 data, and then we have 2021 when it's been very dry. And so you can see when it was really dry, it went all the way down to 151. So that's where the amount of water in the ground and the runoff from stormwater events is really impacting flows into the ponds and impacting their capacity. So what we did in trying to estimate what the flow rate would be, because you need the ponds to be able to handle kind of, the high flows and the low flows, we picked the 314.7 gallons per person per day for right now. Now, that is still extremely high. Typically, if we don't have any data for a town, we'll assume 100 gallons per home, gallons per person per day. But if you think about your water use, it might seem high, but that includes showering, dishes, laundry, all your water use that you use. And we can compare that and look at that. If you flip the page, you can kind of see influent flows, how they vary. The one thing I want to call out in here, so this is the data. We have the orange dots, that's all the little kind of snapshots of flow information we have. And then all the little blue dashes on the bottom, this is precipitation events. And probably the most kind of thing that I want to point out from this graph is, I'm going to stand up and start pointing at stuff. When we do have data, this is where we get spring thaw, right here at the end of spring of 2020. You can see when the ground thaws, the flows go way up, and then they kind of taper down throughout the summer. When you get a rain event like right here, the flows jump up a little bit. So you can kind of see the system impacted. But this was what we had to work with for flow data because of how high the flows have been. Other thing I want to point out is winter water usage, and that's on the next slide. So we can look at what the winter metered water usage is to try to figure out what are typical, like if nobody's watering outside, washing their cars, doing any kind of that outdoor water usage, how much are people using for water? And so we looked back at 2016 to 2020, and those numbers on the bottom of that graph, that's average flow in gallons per day. So it ranged from about 59 to 71 gallons per person per day. So that's where we can kind of establish that. That's the baseline, what we know is going into the sewer system. All the extra stuff is predominantly infiltration, except for there's a couple industries in town that do send some wastewater. Kind of demonstrating again a lot of iodine.
Groundwater, correct sewer pipes.
Yep, exactly. That's inflow and infiltration is all that. And yes, that would be that same thing. Water flowing into cracks in the pipes.
And we got some pretty old pipes here.
Yes. Yep. So we've actually, I'll get into it in a little bit, we've looked at some of the televising data, and we can see a lot of the cracks in the pipes where flow can come in during those high flow events.
And like Quality Park, you use a lot of water for rinsing your machines and everything else.
Yep.
I don't know if we got the water bill there on here. That looks pretty high, isn't it, for Quality Park? I mean, not super high, but they use quite a bit of hot water.
Mm-hmm. There's the turkey hatchery. There's a couple of them. And if you have a lot of industry, that'll drive flows up a little bit, but it's not going to drive them up to that 300 to 400 gallons per person per day. That's still pretty high.
Leakage.
So, yep, it's the leakage. So in projecting, on the one that says projected flows on the bottom, it's just projecting out what flows you need for 20 years. We projected based on that population of 2,216 and then that 314 gallons per person per day flow. And so we're projecting about 695,000 gallons a day is what we're projecting right now. It's a best guess with the information available. So going on to the next slide, the other thing I want to talk about is one of the things that can impact flows in the town is drain tile that goes around homes. And if that drain tile, instead of having a sump pump in a home, is connected into the sewer system. It's very hard for a homeowner to sometimes even know if they have this, because you can't see it unless you go in and televise the service. And so that's something that can contribute also to flows to the sewer. Ideally, you want to keep those connections out of the sewer. The city ordinances, in Beresford and most other communities say that that's not allowed. If you go to the other slide, next slide, what you really want is you want to get drain tile head into a sump, and then that sump, that pump outside and drain out on the grass. Now, I know in the wintertime, some communities will let people pump into the sewer system. But if that doesn't get removed during the spring and summer periods, that can cause problems. The one thing the city could do to kind of see if there's some pumps in a home and if they're connected properly, some communities do sump pump inspections, where they go around and they meet with a homeowner and check that and verify the connections are proper. They can also televise these services to look into the piping and see if there is an illegal connection tying that foundation drain in. The other thing that can be done is when water main is repaired, when sewer main is repaired in a city block, you can replace the services up to the right-of-way, or you can line through services up to the right-of-way. A lot of times the connections, like if they had an old plate tile head, they just tapped a hole in to make the connection years ago, and if it didn't seal real good, that can be a place where a lot of water is coming in, and if you either line or replace those service connections, that can also help cut down on I&I.
Manholes too, the old bricks.
Yeah, the old brick manholes, yes, they can also.
Yeah, we're trying to replace it, right, Jeff? I mean, we're trying to get up to date on quite a bit. I think about 70,000 for 13 manholes. We're picking at it.
They said they've done about 50, which is great.
Oh, yeah, they're
So,
picking at it.
yeah, if you can even set up some maintenance funds and wiggle away at some of this stuff year after year, it makes a big difference in the long run. It really does. So the one thing we've got in here is kind of what can you do to directly reduce I&I. And the two things I have listed here are, and this 25,000 is a placeholder. We just wanted to set some aside if you want Banner to help revise any policy, help the city set up some pump inspection, or any assistance. I put that money in the budget, but the city could also do that on their own if they wanted to. We've also got some pump inspections to be completed. That really would be a city cost where you either have existing staff or hire staff to go do some pump inspections, or maybe college student for the summer to help out with it, something like that. So looking at some of the other things in the collection system, this next slide here that's kind of got the little robot camera at the top, that is what a sewer televising piece of equipment looks like. It goes down and drives along the sewer and gives us a good picture of the condition. And so it looks for cracks. We can see if there's sags in the pipe. We can see those service connections I talked about that are tapped in and leaking. There's a picture down here of kind of what it looks like. This is where there is a crack and there's quite a bit of water coming in. That's a pretty severe photo, but at least gives you an idea what it looked like. And so we went back and reviewed the available televising data the city has. And the city really had quite a bit of data available. And in looking at those televising reports, we identified there's about 19,000 feet of sewer that has some pretty severe cracks or deterioration, some of it which cannot even be repaired via lining, which is a little bit, it's got to be open cut because it's so bad. That really should be repaired within 1 to 2 years. Kind of an immediate need, high priority need. Then we've identified a phase 2, which is really, trying to get to it within the next 5 to 10 years, and that's about 16,000 feet. And then the phase 3, there was about another 14,000 feet that probably should be looked at sometime in the next 15 years. So we ranked the sewer pipes. And there is a map on the next sheet, and I think Jerry also gave you a full-size 11 by 17 of that map. And this is where I apologize, I changed the color on the one on here just in case anybody was colorblind at all, because it's red, blue, and green. And so this one's at least got some orange in there. So I apologize if it's difficult for any of you to read, but this is where the red lines are the phase 1. And so anywhere there's a red line, that's where we'd be recommending that first phase of improvements. And then the other thing we did is there are some line segments that have not been televised. And so we put some money in the budget and to televise those just to make sure that none of them are in poor condition if you're going to ask someone to come in and make repairs.
I just got one question, Jeff. How many more feet we got to go before we're done with the city with televising cameras for free.
Well, so we were trying to do a third a year, so
How
I
far
don't know
right now?
exactly, huh?
How far are we, 2/3 right now?
Yeah, about the,
About 2/3, so we got about a third more to do.
So one of the things the facility plan requires us to do, on that next slide, is it requires us to look at the alternatives to solve the problem. So what would it take to replace that sewer pipe or repair it? And so we've got 4 options laid out here. The state always requires a do nothing option, just to kind of, so a city can consider what if they don't do anything. So the other alternatives we had was open cut replacement, so basically kind of your traditional construction, dig a hole. The alternative 3 is pure in place pipe, and so that's basically we take a felt tap, inject it with resin, turn it inside out, insert it into the pipe, and hold back right side out. Air is injected, it's allowed to harden, and you basically get a brand new pipe and an existing pipe. After the pipe's hardened, they go in and they cut out the surfaces. So that's no dig, so it's no asphalt replacement, so other times that's cheaper, and that's why we look at it. Alternative 4 we looked at is a combination of CIP, but it's open cut replacement wherever it's determined that the previous water facility plan recommended water main replacement. So for example, there's a lot of old 4-inch water main in town. So if that was recommended to be upsized, because really you should have 6 or 8-inch water main in most places to get fire flows that are recommended by insurance companies. So if water main replacement's planned and you're gonna open cut the street for that, it's cheaper to just do the sewer at the same time and do the whole street, rather than doing half and half. So we revise the costs accordingly that way. And so that's alternative 4. The costs are provided on the next sheet. So we've got open cut, CIPP, and then kind of the combination open cut CIPP. Straight open cut is obviously the most expensive. Straight CIPP is the least. The blend of the two in areas where you're going to be addressing water main is somewhere in the middle, which makes sense. But that is the recommended option, just because if you're going to go in and do water main replacement at some point, it doesn't make any sense to spend the money on CIPP for sewer. So we've kind of got the phase 1 recommended improvements, which includes the additional lining or televising, and it also includes lining of a couple of wells, and that's outlined in there. All right, now we'll go through the different.
So just if I was adding all this together, that's about $18 million, is that kind of where you're at there? Put it all together.
It shouldn't be 18, it should be about, it's about 9.
So you're just not including phase 2 or 3.
Yeah, not including phase 2 or 3. I think to do all phases is just too much right now, and I'm trying to piece it up, trying to get it cheaper. So it's about a little over 9 million right now for the clutch, which is still a lot. I mean, I know it's a lot.
2 questions. Okay, like you said before, 6-inch or 8-inch mains, so that's a ballpark figure, it's not in concrete until we figure out if we find some 4-inch pipes somewhere, it might be a little bit more.
If there's a 4-inch water main,
Right.
this would be the cost for half the street into the sewer.
Right,
It
well,
doesn't
it might be a
include the
little
cost
higher.
for water main.
I think Jerry, I believe Jeff talked the other day was 10 million for one, about main 7 for 7th Street, so
The recommended one, what we talked about.
Right.
About 10 million, we just
Yeah.
rounded up. That doesn't include water at all.
No, it
It's a
doesn't
great
include
job.
water, because it's a separate funding application. But if you wanted, we could pull out the old facility plan, and it would be the cost if you wanted to include water. So on the stabilization funds, this is how it flows first into the ponds. It comes in pond 1, over to pond 2, pond 3, and then out to line 3. So you're kind of making use of a good chunk of those ponds as the water flows through. So one of the things that's going on, and you can kind of see it in this picture, but if you look out, this is looking out into your pond where the influent pipe is, and if you're a fisherman and you're out in the water and you've got a kind of a hump out there in the middle, hopefully the fish around, we don't have fish in here, but you can see that spot where it's kind of quiet out at the end. There is solids deposited out there, so there is a ridge. And so you can see it, and that really should be, there's an area where the solids just, as soon as it comes out of that pipe and it slows way down, they just drop out, and settle. And so some of that should be dredged out. And so, I don't know how big the area is, we've just set money aside to have a dredger come out, and then, because there may be solids in that waste,
Maybe what?
maybe, well, there might be metals
Oh,
from the metal company that was in town, in that waste that we can't dispose of in a regular landfill, we just don't know enough yet. So that's why the cost seemed kind of high to remove that sludge. So that's a common term in wastewater sludge, sorry. Okay, throw anything out there that you don't know the word for, just tell it, ask me. So I'll tell you. So with the ponds, we looked at four alternatives again. The first one again, do nothing. If you do that, you're not going to be able to meet your discharge limit and have violations, so that's not really an option. The other alternative we looked at was building additional ponds. So if you build more ponds, so you have all the capacity for flow coming in. That won't work for this situation because in order to, well, the DNR requires you to have 180 days of storage. That you store 180 days of wastewater before you release it. If you want to remove ammonia, you need to store it almost 270 days. And you're probably not going to hit a limit of 1 milligram per liter of that. So additional ponds really are not going to solve the problem. So really options 1 and 2 are not considered. The 2 viable options that we did look into is alternative 3, which is Nexum, a company makes a submerged attached growth reactor, commonly called a SAGR. And then the other one was Triple Point, makes a system called a nitrax system. And I've got pictures showing what each of those are.
Ammonia, what's the largest thing that causes the most ammonia the fastest?
You know, it's ammonia's in, like,
what's
in
the
urine, it's in everything. Cleaning products a lot of times will have ammonia in them.
more than
Yeah, cleaning products have ammonia, we make it in what we eat next week. So it's commonly in things, so it's not like you can go,
cancel one thing.
yeah, you can't try to remove it from the system, it's just there. And your numbers they're not that much higher than the systems we often see. So it's nothing alarming where we can't go find it and try to remove it, it's just there. So this is the SAGR system, and I like to call it, it's a big box of rocks. And so you dig a hole in the ground, you put 2x4s around the outside, you put a thick plastic membrane liner on the inside, and then there's all these little tubes with perforations that can deliver air. And this is all the air piping. The opening gets filled with rock, and then it gets a layer of mulch on the outside. Now that rock's got all kinds of space in it for the water to flow through and move, and that rock provides a great location for bacteria to grow. And this bacteria will be fed the water coming out of the ponds, and so a lot of the other nutrients are broken up, so by the time they get it, kind of the best food left for them is the ammonia. And so that's what they'll break down. They need air though, lots of it. And so that's why there's got to be air piping in there. To give them all the air they need to keep them happy, make them on instead of all the break it right down. And so it's a very simple system to operate. That's why I like that there's lots of these systems in Iowa, lots in Canada, Minnesota. So it's also proven in cold climates.
So this is a continuous flow system then?
Great question.
We're constantly dumping in the creek?
Yes, you would change to a continuous flow, which you don't have right now. The one thing that does, there's 2 implications. You go to a class 2 operator. So believe me, I want to do class 2. Okay, yeah, Casey's not excited about that. So you have a class 2 operator, so you're good there. The other thing it requires was more frequent testing. We've got about $20,000 a year of annual O&M costs extra because you test 3 times a week now instead of just when you're discharging. So that's one of the other big implications. They're proven systems, very good at them. Very, very operator. Any other questions? No? Okay, so where that system would go is kind of on the end of something, right before it goes into the ponds. And then the other thing we've got in here, we've got a UV disinfection unit in case the DNR requires it. Now or DANR, change their name. One thing that we would like to ask them is these SAGR systems have been doing a really good job of removing E. coli. So we'd like to ask the DNR if they would, wait a year or 2 before requiring the disinfection system to go in to see if we can have enough data proving that it'll remove E. coli. Save some money. So we'll ask about that. So the next system is called Nitrax by Triple Point. And these are smaller concrete tanks that have 2 that have aerators in them, and you can kind of see what these aerators look like. So air comes in through this tubing and is injected out through all those little spindles coming out on the bottom, and that's how the air is delivered. Then there's all these little plastic wafers or chips in this picture. That's what the bacteria grow on in this system, and the air is delivered. So same principle, same idea or concept, just a little bit smaller footprint. The one thing with this system is you may need to heat the water, and so there is an additional O&M cost to pay for that. Hopefully we leave gas service out there to pay for the heating. If this system is selected, they was indicated so far at least they prefer to place it between cell 2 and 3. So you go through cell 1, cell 2, then you go through the nitrox and back to cell 3 and then out. Again, here we've got the disinfection unit. They're also saying that they can meet disinfection limits without that, so we may again try to see if the DNR will allow a delay in installing the disinfection. So in looking at the costs on the next slide, do nothing is not obviously no cost. Additional ponds, which really aren't very effective, just because of the land costs and the amount of dirt work involved. The flows are really not economical, even if they would work. So that's dismissed. The Sager and the Triple Point are very similar in cost. The Sager is slightly more on capital construction, but the Triple Point has a higher annual O&M cost. About $68,000 additional a year for the next one. It's about $90,000 additional a year for the Triple Point. And those O&M costs include things like additional labor. It's going to take no time to sample and test. It includes testing costs. We've got some money in there for the electrical costs for the blowers and gas for the heating if it's required. So we've broken that out kind of into a total annual cost. If you look at the O&M plus the capital cost, the annual payment would be about $350,000 a year, and that's a 20-year loan at 2%. Because those two treatment methods are so similar in cost, what we've recommended is that staff go visit the sites. There's one of each of these in Iowa. There's actually several Sagers in Iowa and one over nitrox over right-of-way. Go look at them, talk to the operators. See what they feel comfortable with, see how, what issues those operators have had, and do that before making a final decision.
I just got one question.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody ever put these in to get grant money? I mean, any state in the United States that you know of? Is there any grant money there?
I'm going to get into that.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's all I was
I can't
wondering.
give you a straight yes
Are
or
we
no
locked in
answer.
at 2% or is that a little bit of grant money or?
Yep. So right now, I think it might be on the next slide, actually. Yeah, it is. The one with the coins on it. So what the DANR offers for funding on water and wastewater projects. Right now, you can do a 20-year note at 2%, or you can do a 30-year note at 2.125. Sometimes on some of this stuff, like some of the pumps and equipment, they won't let you do 30 years because it's only got a 20-year life.
What about match? Any match money laying around?
There's not match money lying around. What they do have right now is typically the community's rates would have to be $55 to $60 a month for 5,000 gallons of use to get any grant money at all. And so right now, Beresford's rates, I think, are $31.04 for 5,000 gallons. Yeah, $30.14 is what Beresford rates are. So typically, I would be standing here telling you, no, you're not going to get any grant money. The big question right now is there is supposedly a bunch of money coming in through the CARES and the ARES Act.
Isn't it supposed to be the next 60 days? Somewhere around there.
Yes, and the amount,
$400 million, I believe.
I've heard 475.
Right.
So, but the amount, whether that's all going to get funneled into the SRF program or whether it's going to get pieced up by the legislature for other things in South Dakota, we don't know. And I will tell you also there's a ton of towns, because everybody's heard about this $475 million funding, everybody's trying to get projects in to get a piece of the grant money. So I have no idea how much grant money you'll get, but I would say it's likely that you get some, even though your rates are lower. The other thing is when I show you the impact that the projects would have on your rates is quite high, and so it would put you above that $55 a month threshold.
What was your question?
Yep. No, you're fine.
Is it just the water fee for $50 a month, or is it with the meter, water, and all attachments?
It's just your sewer fee. Your water
Wait a
fee
minute,
is
just the water or just the sewer?
just the sewer. Just your sewer fee alone would have to be over $55 for 5,000 gallons.
Per house.
Per house, yep.
Yeah, see, some people, if you add the sewer to water, the meter fee, it's way higher
Yeah.
than $55.
No, but this is just the sewer.
Oh, I'm sure we can try to get something.
So if you look,
Try.
and what might explain it more at the next page, I put this all together. And so this is where up in and these are the recommended improvements. So up in kind of that brownish color is the collection system, the piping repairs, the additional televising, and the wet well lining. So that's about $9 million. Then at the ponds, there's some money there for dredging, for the ammonia removal system, and then the disinfection possibly if that's needed. And then I put down the sump pump inspection, which would be city costs, and then that policy money if you want assistance. That's just a placeholder. Again, if you don't want it, not needed. So total, right now, that's about 13.7 million. That is a lot of money. What I would suggest right now is if the city is considering doing, I mean, you have to do the bonds pretty much, because that's with the regulations being oil in it and the construction order, that you almost have to do. The other stuff with the collection system, you could spread that over a couple of years, but because of that grant money that's sitting there, I'd maybe say just right now, put the whole 13 million on the state water plant. And so that just tells the state that you might be borrowing this much. You don't have to finalize that loan application until January. But if it's not on the state water plant, you can't increase it. So
Why can't we go for like 10% higher? Most of the construction costs is usually 10% higher. And the total cost of what, just go 15 million.
I've got a 25% contingency in here right now.
Oh, okay.
But here's what I'm gonna tell you too, inflation so far this year, the first 7 months has been like 7%. And so I'm scared how much, things are getting high. Engineers are low right now. So we usually go 20% at this stage. I upped it to 25, just to make sure we have a little
Okay,
more.
so 13 has 25% of it right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
no problem. And I've got the loan at the 20 and 30 year, but what you can see down here on the bottom, this is the total monthly additional cost from the loan repayment and the O&M costs if you do the whole thing. And so that's where, you're at 30 right now, you'd be over 100. If you do the 20-year note, you'd be up around 87 if you do the 30-year, and that's with no grant money. So, and you can also go to the stage where you apply, and then you decide to shrink the project. Usually what happens then is, let's say you get a 25% grant, and you get 75% loan. If you shrink the project, the percentages would just be the same. You don't get to keep all your grant money, but if the project goes, from 7.5 down to 5, you still get that 5 million, 25% of the grant.
One other question. Okay, I saw the grant money. There's different grants. There's federal grants, there's state grants. A question you on Banner, you do just federal grants, or you did state and federal grants combined on one project?
For wastewater projects, it's predominantly been state revolving loan fund money.
But is there any federal grants available if you dig deep enough?
You can get into, and this is where we should pull CCOG in. They can better answer these questions than me even.
Well, I'm just asking.
Yeah, and so what I would say is, sometimes like when you get these, like back in 2009 when we had the ERA money, some of that might have come through federal, but I think almost all the federal right now is being funneled through the state for this project. The only other option would be US, would be
We can double
RD.
check, call a couple senators, then call a couple and see what programs are available, if any at all.
And our USDA would be another funding option, but that sometimes also comes with additional costs and limitations. So. All right.
But in reality, based on current construction costs, for the next 15 years, we're gonna have to spend more in line of 23, 24 million, with phase 2 and 3 factored in there.
Well, I would say in the next 10 years, I'm interested in phase 2. And what might be easier with phase 2 is to start really just if you can put more in maintenance and just whittle away at some of it every year, and then do another big project in 5 or 10 years. To just kind of take another big chunk of it. That's probably going to be more feasible. Do one big project now if you can, and then plan on another big one in another 5 to 7, and then more in maintenance. Raise rates a little bit, get a little more in maintenance.
Tanya, Troy's point, hydro clean Clyde that I deal with on the manholes. He talked to me about a week and a half ago. He's working with the president and the head guy, that if the city would be willing to go 100,000, which we don't have to bid, over 5 years, they would tie it. If we would be willing to go with a contract for 5 years, we could replace 4,000 feet lining for we could get 20,000 feet done for $500,000, which would save quite a bit of what, some of this money.
But that's lining, if there's breaks somewhere where they're offline, then you have to dig to connect the
Well,
pipe
if
again.
it isn't bad, they can line through, but if there's a bad spot, then you dig down, fix that spot, and then you can keep lining, which would still be cheaper than replacing the whole block or 2 blocks or whatever. I mean, there's some, like you said, that they're gonna have to open cut, but if we are willing, if you can get it in the budget, 100,000 a year for 5 years, each year, we could eliminate, some of this would be cheaper than what the actual price.
So that would be, you'd start working on the phase 2 stuff right away. One big project for phase 1 and the pond work,
Yeah,
boom, and then phase 2 where we just start right away instead of waiting 5 years.
yeah, we'd start, if we could find the money, we'd start, if it worked out next summer, we do 4,000 feet, and then the following summer, it's like doing the manholes. You know, we get 50,000, we do so much, some the worst manholes, where we can go, and the same thing with this. That would, so there would be some areas you might save, but then, as we talked before, if we just do the straight sewer lines, then after 5 years, bring a company in to do the laterals out, and then that would go back to the property line, which then would save. But as we talked before with Tanya, that there's a company that working with HydroClean, you can explain that they're both kind of running into each other, trying to do.
So, and this is pretty common, we're seeing. I'm seeing, I mean, not just towns like Beresford working at HydroClean, but big cities too, like Kansas City and Des Moines and stuff, setting up maintenance contracts with contractors like this to come in, and South Dakota bid law allows you to have a project like that up to 200,000 without going off the bid. And so that's where some of the savings would be, is it wouldn't be the engineering fees.
But a 5-year commitment doesn't, it's per year, $100,000?
Yeah.
Even though you would sign a 5-year maintenance agreement, that doesn't make it become a $500,000 project.
No,
And put
you
you
can't
over
go
the bid
over,
limit? No.
you can't go over that $100,000 bid limit, otherwise you have to plan and inspect with your publicly bid director. So the footage, I mean, they're gonna know how much you can do a year, and if you do, they're gonna give you a benefit, I'm sure, when you do a 5-year contract.
That's what they're looking at. They figured if you're willing to, if we're committed to saying we're gonna do so many blocks every year for 5 years, they're gonna give us a better deal because they know they're gonna come every year to work and do it. Instead of, we got you for 1 or 2 years and then, we're not gonna have you come back for another year. They know then they're lining up work for their crews to come every year and do what they're doing. And then they'll give us a better deal.
And the other key thing Keith mentioned, there are companies that can go into the pipes once they're lined, or even without lining, but they can line those services. So they put a clean out in on the property, and they can put a camera down there to get kind of a visual look, and then they put a sock off the main line and unroll it up into the service. And they can go 4 feet, they can go right up to the right-of-way line, 33 feet. But if you think about all those tap-ins and some of those little pipes, those bad connections, or how many feet of service line piping there are, I mean, there's probably more piping, more service line piping footage than there is mainline footage, where there can be cracks and holes and infiltration coming in. So that's why a lot of cities are starting to line at least a portion of that service lateral. So schedule's the last thing. I know this is a long presentation, and I think you all you listened to it probably didn't want to hear as much about wastewater.
Big job. Thank you for coming.
So just as far as the schedule goes, so the presentation that council here is tonight, and we'll deliver a report by the end of the month that will also get submitted to the state. And then CCOG is currently working on the state water application, so the city can apply for and it's complete the initial stage of applying for the funding. It's getting on that state water plan, just saying, we think we might borrow this amount. So then sometime this fall, between now and January 1st, I would come back and we would hold a public hearing with someone from CCOG that would do a very similar presentation to this, also go into a little bit more detail on the funding. And it would be, the public and the citizens would be notified of the impacts of their rates. And so that's kind of the key part of that. So that will be done sometime this fall. The funding application, when the city actually decides how much of a loan they want to apply for, that's due January 1st. And CCOG will work on that and submit that. And then the DANR will consider that loan at their quarterly meeting the end of March. So that third week in March, the city would find out what kind of a funding application we received. Once that's known, then we could start design in April of the improvements and kind of design April through next fall. And then the project could bid sometime, probably usually put the January bid date in there. That's usually a good bid time for contractors to get a bunch of work secured. So then they could begin construction and complete improvements on the ponds and the collection system. It'd probably be 2 different bid packages, with kind of 2 different contractors. They'd work on that during the summer of 2024, and we've got a completion date of 2023. And we've got a construction completion in here of 2024. And that's just because if it takes a while to get some of that equipment, especially at a pond site, we may have to come back and do some cleanup, seeding work, and things like that in the spring of 2024. So, or even in the boulevards, we've got grass seed that doesn't get established well that fall. We can come back and seed it in the spring. So I know I threw a lot at you. You guys have done your best. Some really good questions along the way. Do you have any other questions at all?
Did a great job.
Thank you.
Jeff did a good job, and so did Jerry, and so did Tom. Oh yeah, you're the one that helps out with the paperwork.
And I did put
Mayor
my
did a good job too, so did council.
I put my email and phone number on there, so if you have questions or something comes up and you just let me know, you can have my contact information on that first slide.
You got a business card.
We had a meeting the other day with, Chamber put it on with the governor's husband and some staffers. They talked about the CARES money for the infrastructure. And the takeaway I got, Art was there, the takeaway I got from it is to get that money, you do apply for it, but to have a better chance of getting it, the governor really wants to see those funds go towards those lines and replacing the infrastructure, the sewer and water lines in the street, so that frees up city money to go to new streets and sewers and waters. That's the way I took it. And it was all based on economic development. And they want that money to go towards it, higher priority towards that, I should say. I don't know if that's what you have heard or been any of that, but that was the take from the meeting.
It was in the Beresford paper.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was in the Beresford paper about sewer and water. You gotta make a couple more calls to some senators and see if I can get some federal information about any kind of economic grants or sewer and water, so I'll be doing that this week. I'll get in touch with you if you need some numbers. I gotta get some input first and then talk to Jerry.
Okay.
But $400 million is pretty good money.
There was a presentation at a conference I was at last week that the DNR spoke at, the funding kind of arm of the DANR. And they did indicate that predominantly most of the money really is for infrastructure, largely water and sewer. So that's where I think quite a bit of it will end up going. And I did hear kind of the same message where they want this to be used for the priority projects, to do the repairs. So, because often with this money, you really don't get to do the water main extensions and some of those other projects. And so if that frees up other money so the cities can go do those water main extensions and new developments, that would be considered a win-win for the state.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll talk. Are there any other visitors that wish to speak? Committee and mayor reports, there is none. Department head, finance report.
So at your place setting is the August financial report. There wasn't really too much extraordinary for expenses other than, the fiber to the home paid Urban Cable $185,600. And the East Substation project, we paid Wesco $15,665. The swimming pool did purchase an AED machine at the end of the season, and so that will be placed at the pool opening season 2022. The sales tax revenue, same time last year, we were up $104,000. So that's a very good thing. And the golf course had a great August. Very, very good August. Any questions?
Is there a motion to accept the August
Shall I make
2021?
a motion to accept the Lance Johnson Finance Officer financial report?
Second.
Motion by Schott, seconded to accept the August 2021 finance report. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Old business, consider second reading and adoption of the 2021-05 ordinance creating licensing regulations for cannabis establishments in the city of Beresford.
We deferred that from the last meeting to, because of some of the changes. Right? Yeah, kind of get my meeting date straight there. With the licensing fees and the additional language about city utilities and not having a financial interest in more than one license. So those additional changes were added to these ordinance, so this could be a second reading with those changes that you discussed and wanted included for final approval. So,
Need a motion or second reading then?
what the
Shall I make a motion? Second reading, the adoption of ordinance 2021-05, ordinance creating license regulations for cannabis establishments in the city of Beresford, South Dakota, as our city attorney, Tom Freeman, stated.
Second.
Motion by Schott, seconded to consider second reading and adoption of ordinance 2021-05. Any further discussion?
This the final one then, when we have 110?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing it today.
No further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance passes. Old business, consider second reading and adoption of ordinance 2021-07, zoning amendment for the city of Beresford.
Or do you want to make sure everyone has one of these in front of them? Just for discussion.
Yeah. What's the difference, Jerry, between what was in the packet?
Just clarifying what, from multifamily to general business, the first line there. What you had in your packet was a continuation from the last meeting, so I just made sure you had the right multifamily, residential to general business, industrial, the property is listed correctly. But if you're going to do a second reading, you want to make sure everything was correctly worded in the zoning amendment there. And I took out all the dates and stuff from the last one because we didn't take any action last time. We did have the first reading on August 30th.
So Woody's here. He sent out an email. Did everyone get the email? Providing some responses to questions. Does anybody have additional questions to ask Woody?
About a few people, just chamber, et cetera, and businesses, so just to help understand the impact of the campground. Yeah. Tim here from the lumberyard, and Chambers here. Larry from Ace. And then Don's here because of the special project.
So at this point, we just need a motion. What happens if we don't get a motion?
I guess with two of our people gone here, what do you want them? I guess if Woody wants to pull any this from a vote tonight.
Well, if one of you is gonna vote it down, then we might as well wait. How's that?
Because what he has to do is start all over completely. If one would vote it down, he'd have to start over completely, starting the whole process again. So we'd be minimum 2.5 months to get for possible rezoning. And he does have to still apply for a conditional use permit, which is another, which is before the planning and zoning board of adjustment. So that would take, they have to have 10 days notification prior to the meeting in the paper. They can take action, and then it can be appealed for up to 30 days after that's approved. So that's going to be at least another 45 days to 2 months probably on that.
I really don't want to delay too much more. We're gonna run into winter problems here for making
Can we
those
talk
sense.
before we make a motion, or I gotta make a motion
When's-
first and then talk?
When's our next meeting?
I would make a motion there because we make a
October.
motion at second and we have to do something. And
Can we discuss it now?
Four.
We can October talk about it. I just got one question with y'all. I appreciate all your time and energy and your paperwork. So, okay, once, everything's kind of in place, as far as the ordinances, we're gonna have a good faith, with the ordinance, meaning that if the ordinance states this, that we're gonna try to abide by that ordinances. I'm just saying, because some of the ordinances, you know, on different projects specify certain things right now, as of today, what they state as far as like paved roads or square footage or whatever, so we're gonna try to comply in the best interest of the ordinance and good faith with the city, right?
Sure, we always do that.
Well, that was my only question. I can make a motion. Can we feel it out, or is that?
We have the preferences to have full council, wait for full council.
And I understand that there are two people gone that you may want to talk to or with or whatever in an open meeting. And I think that would probably only be fair to you as well. I don't want to say, I think you'd want input from everybody, not just 2/3 of the council.
If you guys think that's the best way to go, then I'm okay with it.
because as it stands right now, just so everyone knows, with only 4 members of the council here, for anything to pass, he has to get all 4 votes, and I have no vote in any of this.
Yeah, if there's one vote against it by any of those 4, then it's not. You could do a motion, Art. I mean, Tom's gotta tell me.
Executive session.
No.
You could do that, go into discussion, and then you could table it from there too, can't you?
I think that. If you could,
I think Robert's Rules of Order.
I mean, if the desire is to have the full council here, then we just a table it, but
So when was that next council meeting?
October 4th, that's why I asked.
A week from
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
What was the discussion there?
You guys are
You
gonna.
can't discuss a table motion, then there's no no discussion on that.
Who can table it? How's that? How does it get tabled?
Just a motion in a second.
Speak up.
Speak up.
You want to speak, sir?
Yeah.
Donald DeLee, from Beresford, as you may know. I don't want to have to come next month. So what little bit I have to say, I'd like to say tonight. It's not going to change anybody's mind, I don't believe, but anyway, my affiliation with the campground and with Woody deals with a homeless veteran. I'm not going to go into 7 hours of details here because there's 25 hours that I can tell you. But what it amounts to is that, you know, Woody opened the doors, you know, and let the man stay. He went from sleeping under a canvas to a tent, to an old camper that I gave him, and now Woody, you know, obliged him with a fifth wheel with a pop out, or whatever you call it. Want to make a comment about him, and I don't want Larry's head to grow back here behind me. He came to town with no money. I went around with a few of the businesses in town and they've offered to assist him. Now that he's here, I personally know that he spends $3,000 a month in this town. Because Marty and I, we got him his 100% disability. He came to town with nothing. And he's paid for his funeral rights, funeral services and everything else. And so I'm just saying, if we wouldn't have had this facility, I guess it would have been like, you know, 40 years ago when we had a bus going through town. They used to load them up on a bus and send them down to the Vermilion exit or to somewhere else and just dump them off again. This man has been walking every 50 states, all 50 states. With that, I'm just going to say, we're lucky that we had Woody and his campsite to allow this man to stay. The way he ended up here was he gave some people $500 to take him to New York City and they dumped him off at the campground and drove away with his $500. You know, you come out of Nevada from here, or, you know, to here. So anyway, he's a Vietnam veteran, 2 Purple Hearts and Silver Star, all tore up. He's having a bad month this month. This is the month that a bunch of his men got killed and he got all shot up. So he's having a bad week. But I gotta stop with what I can say anymore, but I'm happy what Woody was able to do, what Woody's trying to do, you know. I don't think we're gonna put up a sign on Interstate 29 or in Sioux City or someplace and say we have a campground that'll let you live here. But this veteran pays Clayton for his stay. So he's not a freeloader. And I want to thank Woody publicly for what he's done for this man. And it's a very emotional thing for me. And like I say, Larry Olson and Ace Hardware donated most to start with. And, you know, he's so appreciative. You know, he won't go to Walmart or any place else he shops in Beresford because of what Beresford done for him. And I thank you for the opportunity, sir.
If I could. My name is Marty Connick. I'm a Beresford resident. I work at the Disabled American Veterans in Sioux Falls. I'm an Army veteran myself, and I just want to qualify what Don said. And before this meeting tonight, I couldn't pick Woody out of the lineup of one. I've never met him. I have met the gentleman that Don is talking about. And I just want to say that there are 22 veterans that take their lives every day in this nation. A lot of it's due to homelessness, and that is a hard fact. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Disabled American Veterans to Woody, and thank him for him being a true patriot and American. Thank you.
I want to say something about the peace officers, the policemen in this community. They have treated him with respect. No, they have. I personally went and spoke to him and said that he's not a threat to the people in the community. You know, they give him a ride home. So, you know, for him to take the opportunity to pay for his funeral services here in Beresford, you know, no guarantee he's going to be here forever, but he's happy that he's been accepted in this community so far. Thank you. Thank you, Woody. Like I said, it has nothing to do with ordinance, I understand.
We'll read the table then.
Need a motion to either consider it or a motion to table.
I'll make a motion to table it until October 4th.
Shot second.
Motion by Boone, seconded by Schott to table ordinance 2021-07. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's tabled.
If you got any questions at all, you guys got my email. Everybody's got it.
Somebody
Thank you.
checked the police officer back there too.
Thanks for coming.
I have a question maybe for Woody and me, for you guys, see if we can do this. I know we've met to do meetings off-site before at the pool once or twice. Could we start the meeting out at the campground on the 4th?
Sure. Sure.
Would you be willing to do that?
You betcha.
At,
Do we just start earlier?
I mean,
Dark.
6, oh yeah, it'll be dark.
A couple more weeks, it's gonna be
It'll be
7
darker.
o'clock, it's gonna be darker, yeah.
One of the daily savings things, and that's later.
November State, Finland Stadium.
I'm open.
You guys got some spotlights? I'm just kidding.
Make it early, 5:30.
Is this delayed at 6:30?
Whatever time you come up with, I can do.
Okay, we could come up with the time after the meeting and talk to Elaine and have her get a hold of you or something.
Yep, sounds good.
Does that work?
Sounds good.
Would it be easier to just do small groups so that we don't have a quorum?
I got a point there.
Groups of 3, just go out with Jerry and meet Woody if you need.
What would be the best way to start the meeting out there or one smaller?
When you start having everybody there,
One shot,
start
otherwise
the
you're.
meeting here and go from there.
Hearsay and what's said one time is maybe different than the other time.
Start the meeting out there so we can all be there and talk to you about it.
Start the meeting out there.
Could everyone make it about 6:30? It says 7:02 sunset, so I'm guessing it's gonna be dark by 7:30, so.
Let's say 6:15. Can we do that?
Just don't talk about it. Yeah.
6:15?
Yes.
We just have to publish that, right?
You guys don't want supper,
We
but
want to publish the agenda.
So we don't have to like prove that, it's just.
What's that?
you want supper then too, or?
No.
What time are we doing it?
6:15?
6:15?
6?
Planning process.
You're saying 6?
6?
Just to make it easy?
Yes.
6.
Right,
6 bells.
You convene there and then just recess to come back down here.
He's supposed to. If you take any action when you come back, maybe he'll be back. But
Oh, we can try. If you're agreeable to that, Woody.
Oh, absolutely.
Alright.
Let's get this done. And anybody that's here can come too, I don't care. You might have something. No big.
It's a public meeting, so anyone can show up.
Alright.
All right, we're out of here.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Next item, the old business, consider reading and adoption of ordinance 2021-08 fiscal year 22 appropriation.
So at your place, I printed out the general fund and the enterprise funds again. And if the field is highlighted, that for, at the last meeting, you had asked me, you had requested to make changes to those. So on the general fund, the city administrator, finance officer, police, street, park, all the health insurance was adjusted. In the fire, we added the 7th and final payment of $12,500 for the fire truck. And in the pool, the part-time wages were off, so then those were adjusted down. The library also had Barb's wage included. On the enterprise accounts, every single one of them, the health insurance was readjusted, and it was all adjusted lower.
So we all ready? Shall I make a motion to consider second reading and adoption of ordinance 2021-08 fiscal year 2022 appropriations as Ron Johnson, finance officer, stated.
Boom, second.
Motion by Shotton, seconded to consider second reading and adoption of ordinance 2021-08 fiscal year 2022 appropriations. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Approved. Consider resolution 2021-08, resolution concerning the redistricting of Union County in 2021. This is a letter that Jerry got from the Union County Commission, right?
District, yeah.
And this is where milk
This milk brought the one that they were adopting down in Union County, so I just substituted Beresford in. So all of those areas were sort of originally in Union County, so.
Anybody would like to propose a motion to consider that 2021? This pertains to redistricting.
Motion.
Yeah.
Shall I make a motion to consider resolution 2021-08, a resolution concerning redistricting of Union County in 2021 as Jerry signed stated.
For a second.
Boom will second that.
Motion by Shotton, seconded to consider resolution 2021-08, resolution concerning redistricting of Union County in 2021. Any further discussion?
Yeah. What is the real advantage or disadvantage? I don't understand the hurry of letting the state redistrict.
It's a portion of Lincoln County too, Mark, in that. So just to be clarified, it was Union and parts of Lincoln that are currently in the area.
Yeah,
Well, what I'm saying is that
All it changes is legislative districts. It doesn't,
what I think that they were looking at was potentially taking off southern Union County and putting it into Clay,
with Clay, you know.
where then I think less of our population would be south, and it almost reinforces it more towards Canton, right? Potentially. So I think Milt's concern, and some of the Board of Commissioners, or is that what it is, the public
County Commissioner.
county commissioners, is you're almost removing the population center to the south and giving less voice to the south and pushing it up to.
They just want it kept the way it is,
Correct.
not redone.
But Southern Union would join with Clay, which would give them more population.
For everybody in between southern,
Right. Where it's stuck in the middle.
removes all of our population basically, for a good chunk of it. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying that was the.
Are we supposed to say Lincoln County, because mine only says Union County?
It's
The second paragraph.
Want me to modify
It
it?
says to talk about, you're just gonna have to approve the resolution, but the resolution doesn't include portions of Lincoln County also are.
Okay.
It says District 16 all the way to Canton. So.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Approved. Pay request number 7, Altitude Energy for East Substation construction and West Substation modifications in the amount of 81,000.
Yep, 81,569.81. That'll be the final payment to Altitude Energy. Correct.
Correct.
Doug makes a motion to approve pay request number 7 to Altitude Energy for the east substation construction, west substation modifications. And I just lost my place in my minutes here, or my notes, but in the amount of 81,000. 569.81. Thank you, Troy.
Second.
I had a couple of screws.
Motion by Doug and seconded to approve pay request number 7 in the amount of 81,569.81. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Approved. Beresford Substation construction engineer statement of final completion and owner's acceptance of contract.
You've authorized the final payment. This is just the final completion form that we'd like to have, or the engineers would like to have assigned and fill out, so, with Altitude Energy.
The motion to sign the owner's acceptance of contract.
You need one?
Who are we authorizing to sign it, the mayor?
The mayor usually does on these.
Doug makes a motion to approve the Beresford Substation construction engineer statement of final completion and owner's acceptance of contract, and hereby authorize Mayor Nathan Anderson to sign such.
Boom will second said motion.
Motion by Doug and seconded to authorize signature of the substation construction engineer statement of final completion and owner's acceptance of contract. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Approved. Division 1 for the top procedures exhibit A with WAPA.
Alright, I don't know a ton about this, but we've added 115 kV bay at the Beresford substation. And part of that $1 million that we had to spend with WAPA, this just recognizes that we do have it in there, and they just want us to sign off and say that we added something to the WAPA sub. So it's 115 kV bay at our substation. We just need to have an authorization to have the mayor sign this one also.
Should I make a motion to revise 1 for the top procedures exhibit A with WAPA as jury signed stated for the
Doug second.
Motion by Schott and seconded to approve signature of revision 1 for the top procedures exhibit A with WAPA. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Approved. Full-time police hire.
I want to move forward with Kip Stearns. He's a certified officer, been certified since 2016. Former employment is Turner County. I'd like to start him at step 4, which would be $21.28 an hour. I believe that's 85.5% of the cap.
21 what?
$21.28 an hour.
What's his last name?
Stearns.
Kip.
Kip.
Should I make a motion for full-time police officer for 21.28 as the police chief stated.
Second. Motion by Schott and seconded to authorize the full-time police hire of Kip Stearns at the rate of $21.28 per hour. Further discussion?
How many applicants did we get?
One certified. One certified and 4 or 5 uncertified. Start date, I believe we already touched base with Allison on this, with the 23rd is the start date. So, in a couple days.
Does he live?
Sioux Falls.
Getting your sewer line.
Got 5 feet long.
Okay, Troy.
We don't have a requirement for emergency personnel to live within.
We don't, and it would be silly if we did, because, law enforcement world, it's hard to hire people nowadays, so if you have residency restriction, we're gonna get 0 applicants. And we're gonna have to hire uncertified people, which, that's another meeting, but we're gonna have to address this, because we've been getting lucky. So, one of these days, our luck's gonna run out.
100%.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Part-time hire for liquor store.
Would like to hire Kelly Henderson at $9.45 an hour, minimum wage, and, we have did a background check and everything checked out, so. She is good to go. Emily Hendrickson.
Dolan approves to hire a part-time for.
How about you make a motion?
Or-
Instead of approving it.
Dolan makes a motion, sorry, my mind's alternate. For a part-time hire at the liquor store for Emily Hendrickson, starting pay of $9.40 per hour.
45.
$9.45 per hour.
I'll approve that second.
Motion by Doden, second to approve the part-time hire of Emily Hendrickson at the rate of $9.45 per hour. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Is there a motion to authorize a step pay increase for Tony Warwick to $27.93 per hour?
Shall I make a motion for step pay increase for CO Tech 20, Larry, for $27.93?
For a second.
Boom second.
Motion by Shot and seconded to authorize a step pay increase for CO technician Tony Warwick at a rate of $27.93 per hour. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Declare 1993 base utility trailer surplus for the fire department.
We've been, talking with the cars a little bit, and I want to check first before we just got rid of it. It's a trailer that, was given to the fire department about 15 years ago. They don't use it anymore. It's pretty much just kind of a few bags of floor dry kept in it, but, they got another trailer now, maybe make some room inside there. So they'd like to get rid of this one, and I sent a message out to some of the department heads that might have a need for it. Jeff's here, and he said they might have a use for that, so we're gonna just transfer it to the, from the fire department to the streets department. And, being as this is a property that the fire department owned, that was never bought with city funds, we'd like to pay them $1,000 towards the purchase of the trailer. We're looking today to buy one about that quality with dual axles, new, if you can get ones between about $6,500, so. We think we can use that as more of a tool trailer, something that we can take to a work site or when we have an emergency, we have those tools that are already ready to go, so.
Is the motion you want?
I just want to,
the fire department.
yeah, we'll just.
Shall I make a motion to declare 1993 base utility trailer surplus for the fire department, which the city of Beresford, South Dakota is gonna give Tarzan $1,000 for a trailer and switch it to the street department for Jeff.
We're not really surplusing it, but we're just gonna transfer.
Transfer, okay, transfer.
Transfer from one department to another.
Transfer. It says surplus on the papers, transfer to the street department.
Second.
Motion by Shot and seconded to authorize the transfer of the trailer to the street department, $1,000. Any further discussion? All fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to accept the 5 new firefighters to their roster for insurance purposes?
Boone makes a motion to accept those 5 as Beresford volunteer firemen.
Dolan second.
Motion by Bruin seconded to approve the addition to the Beresford Volunteer Fire Department. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Is there a motion to approve the 2 travel requests?
Boone makes a motion to approve both travel requests.
Shot second.
Motion by Boone and seconded to approve the 2 weeks of travel requests. Is there any further discussion? All fair say aye. Opposed? Approved. Is there a motion to pay the bills?
Jordan so moves.
Ken Boone will second that.
Motion by Jordan, seconded to authorize payment of the bills. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. No further business from the council meeting adjourned.
You did pretty
Maybe, maybe first stick around, we got a bunch of signings, so we can do here, so.
Bunch of signers there.
Do you have all that? So, 3 more.